Hi, John.
Elena, it's great to see you.
And we're enjoying our Sunday.
We
So it's
are.
not even that late, but I already drinking
You're drinking, by the way.
Californian stuff like hard kombucha.
Hard kombucha. This is something I wanted to tell you, actually show you quickly when you mentioned having something to drink. So I don't know if you've seen this, but Santa Maria Novella, which is the old perfume house in Florence, still make liqueurs. And I bought one. It's an elixir de rose. So it's a rose flavored liqueur. I guess it used to be prepared as a like a medicinal type
You
of.
can just add it to something, right?
You could, or drink, I guess, in very small glasses, right? Make a few different flavors. I think some are herbal, probably not very pleasant, I think, but the rose sounded very nice. So what have you been smelling recently? You were saying something just now
I
about something
threw away
you,
the perfume, one
yes,
perfume.
yes. Is it
Yeah.
something you can tell me about?
It was Nuit de Bakelit, actually. It was probably I sprayed somewhere on my computer
Hmm.
and I just couldn't stand it. It's not my kind of thing. I don't like deconstructed flowers, but I know that absolutely everybody loves it.
It's one of what I've found interesting about the perfume, I have to say, is the bottle and the presentation itself were very interesting in that it's very minimal, but a little bit.
Amazingly beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember it was very seductive packaging. I liked the fragrance, but it was one of those very artistic fragrances that I didn't end up wearing very much.
I like tuberose in general for tuberose, for its beauty, for its softness. This kind of tuberose, it was like ugly to me. So I'm sorry if somebody likes it. It was ugly, it was miserable, it wasn't beautiful. Like they wanted,
Mm.
as if they wanted to show the tuberose in its absolute misery. But what is that horror to you?
Oh, well, oh gosh, the horror. That's a tough one. I will. There was one actually for when we had high expectations, and it absolutely did not meet the expectations. And was one of the Frederic Malle fragrances, and it was the one that had a big bunch of aldehyde in it. And do you
Outrage
remember?
egg, yes, I
It,
hate it too.
it was so not interesting to me at all, and I was. And well, it was not even not interesting, but I really didn't like it. I didn't like the smell of it. I felt it
All
was
the same all the time and
yeah,
loud and invasive.
yeah, all of that. It was very invasive. It was also very like it never. I kept waiting for the opening to sort of dissipate and then something very beautiful to come in, but it never happened. Was it superstitious or was that the name?
Superstitious, superstitious. I thought
Superstitious,
that was
right?
outrageous. No, outrageous is a different one by the
Yeah,
same
that
Frederick Malle.
and there was so much hype about an expectation about it, and I think that's the part that got me angry is that I was expecting this to be a very modern approach to aldehydes and something revolutionary, and it wasn't at all. It felt like straight out of the bottle aldehydes and a couple of just general woody floral, yeah, aroma chemicals in there. So it was just, yeah. So that was one that I actively disliked. I wasn't
I
happy.
think Frederick Malle has quite many monsters in his collection. Beautiful things and
Yes, it's very inconsistent. It's like when you see those charts where there's lows and highs, and very much that way. A few that I really like, and a few that are so abstract or so strong in one direction that I can't understand them at all. So I agree. I
maybe
agree on
because
that one.
perfumers finally set free with their desperate ideas after all this designer and mass fragrances, and they just don't care.
This is true. This is a very good point. Yes, you're right. And they may say, I don't care if anyone likes this or not, which may be the case, right?
Yeah.
So you wanted to also talk about some rose perfumes, I think, right?
Yes. Well, I have quite a bit roses, and I try to grow them myself.
You do.
Like,
You grow some wonderful roses, actually.
oh,
A
they are
lot.
wonderful only part of a year because we have so many things that eats them. Maybe in your area, because it's so very much like a United Kingdom climate, right?
Yeah, it is quite like it. And roses can grow very well here, but I do agree that, like, for example, where I live, there's some native roses. They generally call them beach roses that they like the salt water and
Oh,
the salt in the soil, and they just grow almost like weeds here. And fortunately, they have a really beautiful smell, but the flowers themselves are not very showy. They're just single petal roses, but the colors are really bright. They're like a bright white or a bright sort of magenta color. So they're really beautiful to look at.
I admire actually that kind of rose that is so hardy and can survive in bloom. So it's such a character.
It is, yeah. And I think that the smell that can come from it isn't always the prettiest smell. It's definitely like it reminds, like the ones around here, it's a little bit more like what can I say? It has a bit of that salty sea type of smell to it. It's an interesting type of smell for a rose. I haven't quite found a perfume that actually captures it well, which is something I want to find someday, you know.
You have your own rose in your
I know
collection, so
this
you
is
can
something.
add another. There are kind of two types of roses, roughly speaking. Something that perfumers want to and know, because they working with oils, with absolutes, and they know how the real rose smell. And rose for people who just want something fresh, like from a florist shop. People discover more about rose raw material and they are fine with it. And perfumers also want to sell their perfumes. And I see this compromise, for example, in La Rose or à la Rose by Francisco Jan, and especially in Le version. So it's even fresher, even fruity, even lighter. Rose, No Man's Land by Byredo.
Yeah, which I think has some pepper in it. If I'm not mistaken.
It's a little bit more kind of sophisticated rose, because of Francisco Jan rose is just a rose exactly to please people who want a very fresh, wet rose.
Yes.
So, and for me, it's not even a perfume; it's rather a smell.
No, I agree. In fact, there's an interesting concept I was going to tell you about. So there's a rose. In fact, I have it here, and that I sort of use as this is the Rose Absolue by Aniko Tao, which I think is from, I want to say it's from the early 00s or the late 90s. And this is just rose. It's nothing else. And when I've given some people to smell this, they find it interesting, but it's not really a complete perfume. It's actually just the smell of rose. And so it wears very strangely on the skin. It's an interesting sort of, it feels more like a science experiment. Do you know, like, it's not that you're smelling rose essential oil, but it's just the bare minimum put together to make a perfume to last a little while. You really have to just love the smell of roses, because it literally is nothing more than that, than just a pure rose. It's not even got the freshness you were talking about like, you know, the dew in the morning or something, you know, which, so if you compare this next to something like, I'm trying to think of a really full...
Something like this. I mean, it's not full. Roses de Chloe, and this is very, very fresh rose, but it's made of peach and apple and tarragon, many other things, but it's rose.
For a lot of perfume wearers, I think that appeals more to them probably than a very straight rose, which is almost a little uncommon for us. I mean, I find it interesting, but I think a lot of other people they may not be sure about that, you know.
Remember, it was the end of the 90s when roses were not at all appreciated. You couldn't find anything like designer fragrances. And maybe Stella McCartney was among first to introduce just rose to the public. It was great perfume. But then roses started to appear in designer fragrances and in niche. They wanted to show the rose the essence, like the depth, the raw material. Yeah.
Particularly the depth. When you said depth, that makes a lot of sense, because rose it is very deep. I mean, compared to some other flowers that are, I think, just more ethereal or lightweight, rose is really, it's a very deep smell. And I think the folks in niche wanted to almost use it for every bit of its strength, like for more of a strong material, you know. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned the Stella McCartney stuff, because she really was pretty groundbreaking, wasn't she, to use it as a focus for perfume? That was very unusual, and people really responded.
In modern version is quite a good rose. It's a little fresher than it was. But I think that situation has changed in niche as well. So after we were we have in Spain on this roses and deep and true. So you want something, the rose inside the composition. I mean, it is in the past, those explorations and the deeper and deeper and deeper and truer rose material.
It's almost like the rose has been...
Like we know them already, so let's move on.
I definitely agree with you too. So what's interesting is at the same time, we did see a lot. If you remember, about maybe 5-6 years ago, there was a whole lot of perfumes that came out that were, well, first there were all the rose oud fragrances, and then there were all those sort of rose amber perfumes that kind of entered the mainstream. There were tons of them, right? Like Aramis put out Calligraphy Rose, and then I think Chopard put out like Rose Malachi and all these different. So it sort of was getting into those like syrupy, very Arabian type rose things, you know, which was, I don't know, 2-3 years.
It's a huge influence from Arabian perfumery, the rose everywhere.
Yeah. I think that had its own kind of little tributary on the river. And I'm not sure if, I mean, they're still very popular, those perfumes. I mean, I love those perfumes myself, but I agree that I think that it was a bit of a fad. Like, I think people are looking for more roses that they could wear every day. You know, that's...
Yeah. And I'm glad that you showed that rose by Annick Goutal, like a rose. And I have a couple of roses that are just roses, like a ideal rose that you can compare other fragrances to. For example, this Rose Mélissine.
Ah, such a good one.
Or Jevoy.
From Jevoy, yes, it's such a good one.
And it's just rose without any additions, without any noise, like aromatic or amber, anything. It's just rose. Not very like easy to wear because it attracts all attention to itself. Yeah. So it's a you and rose. It's not like yours.
Also, what I love though about that particular one is it's very sharp in this really good way. Like it almost has like a citrusy, like it has the very light, like it's rose at a top note and middle note. Like it's a beautiful thing, you know, that whole... was that sort of like a one-off there? Do they make that each year, or do you know if they're...
Francois Henan, he said he was introducing it as a limited edition, but you can find it in his store and online and in Lycosent as well. It becomes something of a regular, I guess, because it just sells very well.
It's a fantastic, like you said, it's a great thing to sort of study as a great example of a rose, of a really good rose, the Mélissine. Yeah.
There is Monte Carlo. They have two roses, the Taif rose.
The Taif rose, which I love.
And Rose de May, created by Jean-Claude Delaunay. It's not, again, an easy rose. Rose is never easy when it's just deep rose.
What is this like? Because I have not smelled his Rose de May.
It's a rose composition upside down. It starts quite intense and deep, and then it fades away. It goes from the depth, from the dark side to the light and like shallow, but very pleasant. It has immortelle inside and geranium, and it's kind of rough roses, citruses, but at the same time, it never goes too much to that sharp side. Great one. I can't wear it all the time. It's too much.
Paris Monte Carlo, I always feel like every raw material they use is so interesting, and they do very interesting things with it. You know, they always sort of pair it with unusual other notes, and it seems also kind of clean, like they don't put too many things in the fragrances. They're very interesting.
Especially when Jean-Claude Delaunay is the author of the latest.
That's a really good
Mimosa and Lavanda.
Right.
Oh yes, how could I forget this one?
Oh, yes, of course. T-Rose,
T-Rose, the Perfumer Workshop.
It's such an interesting perfume, isn't it? Like I always, there's a lot of times I take it out, and I think everyone who likes perfume should have a bottle of this. I mean, it's very inexpensive. It's such a great study of just a basic.
And it's not very expensive.
Rose. No, it's very cheap. Yeah,
but they also introduced the same thing, but in kind of parfum concentration. It's eau de parfum.
What does the eau de parfum smell like?
Absolutely, just the price point is different. Maybe a little bit more intense, but it's intense enough.
Yeah, no, it's so loud. But what I do like about it is that it's so interesting that they've never really changed it. I can't discern any changes over the years at all, you know.
And it was launched a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it still has that very potent, you know, I think it might be a slightly exaggerated idea of what a
And
fresh
it
rose
also
is.
rose from a plastic, like from the shop.
Yes,
But
it
in
is.
more intense, like a true rose. And Matvey said that they put a very interesting ingredient inside. It's called rose crystals.
That's an old-fashioned material, actually. The rose crystal. That's been around for quite some time, which would make sense since it's an older formula, right?
This is one of the rose perfume, like you have to have it if you like roses.
You do.
And it's not rose like old-fashioned rose. Usually
no,
it's a characteristic for rose perfume, but Stella McCartney and this one, they don't have any age and they're not old-fashioned at all.
What I was curious what your thoughts are about the Rose 31 from Le Labo, if you
is it with cumin? That sweaty rose, I believe so.
It is a sweaty rose, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Amazing.
It's very sweaty, and it's funny to smell it now because I haven't smelled this in a while. It's so sweaty that it almost has
especially when you focus on that, right?
But it's very soapy too. It has that slight bit of soap. You know how sometimes when cumin, it's almost like the cilantro soapiness. There's a little bit of that in here too. Very spicy. I didn't realize just how spicy this was. It seems to me now smelling this is, you know, they make all the things to be unisex, but it's far more, well, I don't want to get too much into the male female, but it seems this sort of central rose is kind of a little more prevalent now. And it's very much that very dark blood red kind of rose.
I sprayed it on Zoran, and it was much better on him than on me, for example, when we were trying it in store. Yeah. Have you seen those strange bottles, a new collection by Bulgari Allegra? They have those bonbons, the candies.
Oh, yes. I haven't seen them in person yet, but what's it?
They have magnifying things that you wear together with fragrances, and they can be worn alone. And they have a rose.
Okay.
So you wear something, and you wear, for example, rose magnifying essence together.
Oh, that's right. So it kind of like
it's not my kind of thing.
I was going to say it doesn't sound like
instead of buying one bottle, you have to buy two.
Oh yes,
more. So, and that rose, it was actually very praised, and I smelled it, and it's really nice, very interesting kind of rose. It's very warm, like a jam, but not too sweet. And I found, and my favorite rose, Divine Spirituelle, it has the same kind of effect, but it's a composition. It's not just a magnifier. Anything.
What else is in? So the Bulgarian one you're talking about, it just adds like kind of a punch of rose to what you're wearing. Is that sort of what it does? Okay.
Yes.
Right.
But you can also wear it alone. But it's just a little bit music of the same tone, never changing. Oh, this, of course, red roses. So how can you reflect the color, the olfactive color in a perfume? Jo Malone with red roses, they created exactly red roses, because maybe because of the honey in it's actually honey. It's quite a lot in the many rose fragrances, but here, if you put too much of it, the honey will jump out, and it smells so dirty, like like only honey can do.
Right, exactly. You know, I brought a rose along that I thought you might. I'm not sure if you smelled this before, because this is interesting. It's from Penhaligon's, and it's a very old formula. Apparently, it's called Hammam Bouquet. Yeah, this is the musk rose.
It's a beautiful bottle. Look.
Yeah, I know. I love their bottles. But this is what I love about this is that it's supposedly for men, and it's this very, very like voluptuous, like very kind of you know, pompous, almost pompous sort of rose, right? Very, very British in a way. And it's so interesting because it's pretty much just a bit of green, a big, very fluffy rose, and then clean musk at the bottom. It's just a very linear. It's very much the sort of thing you would wear if you're going to something in the morning and you're dressing up a lot. So like if one were going to go to church, or if you were going to go to like to a picnic in the summer, like it's that kind of, it's not something you'd wear at night at all. It's for sort of like the type of person who really dresses up. But again, you dress up and you want to be seen. It's not about going clubbing at all. But it's interesting to me that a lot of rose fragrances, I feel like either they tend to be if they evaporate quickly and they're very kind of pretty, or they tend to be very dark night. This is one of the few that is very rich, but also to be worn, I think, during the daytime. It has a lot of very ardent admirers. Like some people swear by this as like a signature scent.
For example, this one, Serge Lutens.
Oh, yeah.
La Fille de Berlin.
Yeah. Such a
beautiful rose. Not he has more of rose fragrances, but this particular is so mysterious. And it has honey as well inside, but that honey you can't dissect and you can't find. It's such a organic part of the rose. And the composition, just like with the Rose de May by Paris Monte Carlo, it goes the opposite direction from rich and dark to very light and dreamy, like that red Brunhilde. That after all is just a girl, and you see it like through those layers of time, and it goes pale and pale and pale because you can't reach that far. You can invent your own story based on his fragrances. Oh, a killer. Love Kills by Musk Milan. You have to be very careful with this rose. It's geranium rose. Geranium is such a material to create a rose, maybe even more roses than the rose itself.
It's a very strong, but strong isn't the right word. It has such a presence is I think the word I'm using. Presence, yeah. There's a rose actually, and I sadly I don't think they make this anymore, but I would love if they could. And I wanted to mention it because I think it's one of those cases of the really effervescent rose. It was one of the Comme des Garçons series. Yeah, this is the red rose that they made, and this is like rose and champagne basically. It's so bright. It's sort of almost like rose and ginger ale, like that kind of. It's so bright, and oh god, it's like popping right off the strip. It literally is the sensation of champagne. It's that exciting, and I would love to know how they managed to do this because it's brilliant. But I can see how for some people it's too exciting, and you feel like your skin's alive for hours.
One of roses for men. It's Karen, New York.
Which one is this from Karen now? This
Rose Ink. It's leather and rose, and leather is made of saffron. You can describe like a biker rose.
Okay, because I love saffron as a note. Like
there's also a little bit of gasoline. Rose, Nina Ricci. Okay,
what
Rose
is this
Extase. It was made by Francisco Kjan, and it's very much in the era of Baccarat, Rouge, lighter, fruitier. I'm not a fan of like ambery rose. Honestly, because I liked them at the beginning with discovery of Arabian style, and it was new, it was great, but when it's replicated many times, it's not exciting anymore. If you like that warm ambery rose, this one is really great.
I like the fact you said it's a bit lighter. That sounds interesting to me, because the amber ones that go very dark, they smell great, as you were saying. I think they smell great initially, but then they just turn into they can turn into just a general woody, sweet wood smell at the end.
Trafalgar Dior is also in the same style. Berries, amber, and rose. Like a light version of Baccarat, and very enjoyable. I like it.
Yeah.
Another amber rose is Delina La Rosée, and Delina itself is already a rose fragrance.
Yes.
This one is much, again, light and rosier and fruitier.
This one I've liked. I actually like this one because it's a bit fruitier. This is a nice one. Actually, I've smelled that. This is a pretty good one, I think.
But the bottle is kind of, I don't know, too decorative. Ended with something. Right. Another rose that I really like, Derby rose. So English rose.
Yeah.
Jammy rose, but it's sweet. But sometimes too sweet rose is like, oh my god, again another sweet rose. But this one is also very powerful, and it's jammy like the real rose could be. Especially English roses, you get that sweetness from the rose. And Derby rose by Chantikai.
Yeah, great this one I've read about on our site, and people seem to really like this one quite a bit.
Okay, so I don't have now at the moment. Oh, maybe this one I will show you because
Yeah.
it's powerful. It's too powerful for me. It's a new perfume house of one perfume, Rose 1845 by Lazarus Duvos. It's a rose with amber and with many spices and woods. This is a rose with a different kind of amber, not in the way of Baccarat or Arabian style perfumes, but
So not quite the
woodier and
sweet.
drier, so
Gyre, that's
more
interesting.
aggressive. Col Noir,
Mhm.
a very beautiful rose, but with musk. So I'm not a fan of too much musk. It's not my type of rose, but the beginning is absolutely amazing. And it's quite
Mm-hmm.
light, musky rose.
What do you think is coming up like for what do you see on the horizon for rose perfumes?
So we still see fragrances named after ingredients because it's easy to communicate with customers.
Mm.
So this is the first hook to get a customer, right?
Right. Yep.
But it has been like that already for years. And people want compositions, reflections of feelings like it was before. To create another rose ingredient like deep oil rose, it's not that exciting anymore because we already know a number of such fragrances. I think that we will see less roses actually. When you meet just another rose, you start being suspicious and try to find, is it like your rose? No. You lose that nice approach towards fragrance to accept it as a fragrance, as an idea.
Right.
Because it's not an idea, it's an ingredient, a replication, and you are normally critical because you know how materials smell. And I would like to see more roses like the same Roses de Chloe, composed of so many things, so many nice things, and you actually can smell if you want that an apple and a peach and many other flowers, and that amazing Chloe fragrances base, but at the same time I smell rose. Like real one. Beautiful.
I agree that we've kind of investigated roses a lot, especially in the past 10 years. There have been a lot of roses and a lot of soliflowers, and it is interesting to see these compositions that are including roses in a bouquet of a few flowers and then with some fruit. And I find myself trying to pick out, like, do I smell some of these individual flowers? And when I do, does one stand out or not? And it is interesting to try to create a composition where there is a rose in the center that just has a few things around it. And does it, actually fall back or does it come forward? I could see that being more of a trend, but I do agree. I don't think we're going to see roses at the center of composition so much for a while, because I do think the market's been kind of saturated with those.
In rose, Frederic Malle, or other roses, they were unique, they were alone. It wasn't so many roses at the market at the time.
Yeah.
Now we have plenty, so we'll see. We can't predict, but I think that we need something else. We need something, maybe even some other materials, and just to leave rose for a while. Maybe rose will transform into its color, like that red shoe, Carolina Herrera. Red shoe, it's rose fragrance, but it's not rose fragrance. It's just, you see the color, and so you think about rose, but it's not real rose. It's contrived. For me, it's more like a jasmine.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's more, it's more about the shape and the color and the sensation, right? It's all of those different things. It's not really about the notes in a way. Yeah. About sort of the sexiness of it, it's all of that. That is an interesting point.
It will not disappear. That's wrong, because rose can't disappear, but it will just expand and include many other things inside.
I want to see, what I would love to see is, there was some perfume that came out that did this, but I can't recall what it was, but I want to see it combined with some things that we don't normally see, like roses and vetiver, but something like that. Like, that's not common. It's always roses and patchouli, right? But I would love to see unusual combinations like that. That would be interesting.
That's a good direction for rose fragrances, some new territories. I hope that our readers will suggest more roses, and especially those weird ones.
Well, it's great to talk to you, Elaine, as always.
Oh, see you very soon. Bye.
Excellent. Will do. Bye.
Bye.